Welcome back to Textbook Roundtable Podcast, where we break down fleet tech, telematics, and industry trends. Today's guest is Joy Baylor, a Geotab expert and founder of Telematics 411 Consulting. With 10 years in the space, she's helped fleets decode telematics, troubleshoot issues, and turn data into real savings. She's trained thousands, built custom reporting solutions, and even had fleet managers recognize her years later, including one who remembered her for rickrolling him in a training video. In this episode, we're covering the biggest mistakes fleets make, why education is the missing link, and how to turn telematics data into decisions that matter. Let's get into it. Welcome, Joy.
I wanted to start for the audience to get a better understanding of kind of where you started from in telematics and your journey to where you got to where you're at now.
So I actually started in telematics. It will be 10 years ago this upcoming May. I was an intern for a Geotab reseller. I was wrapping up. I went back to school to finish my college degree, and I was looking for an internship so that I could finish my degree because there were 3 internships required for that. Came across the Geotab reseller and ended up there for 7.5 years. So that was a much longer period of time than just the internships.
So what'd you do during that time when you was at Geotab?
Sure. So it was a Geotab reseller. So when I first got in, it was the founder, the owner, and myself. And so I got to do a little bit of everything. I helped with sales, marketing, tech support. I managed the website for the whole 7.5 years I was there. Literally a little bit of everything under the sun.
Where were you the most comfortable where you said, man, this is where I'm strongest at?
Of those different areas that I filled in? That's a great question. I would say the support side was really cool because I was helping people, but it's so tough, David, because I love the sales side. I've been doing Photoshop since I was in the 6th grade, so I enjoyed the marketing side, and I learned a lot on the web dev side with the website. If I had to pick one, though, I suppose the support side was probably, it was the best because I got to put all of the other skills that I was learning into practice, because even tech support is in itself a form of sales and marketing. Like, you are essentially trying to provide the absolute best services for your customers to make sure that they never want to leave, that they always want to be using your product and stuff. And the way that you do that is, even just the way that you set up an email, for example, is like, it can be beautiful marketing because anybody can write an email, but are you writing it so that it's readable? Are you formatting it so that you've got, the most important points are in bold so that it's actually pleasant and people aren't trying to comb through the email to figure out what you're trying to tell them? They can just look at it and be like, okay, these are the steps I need to take. So I would say probably the support, because it merged a whole lot of the other skills into one.
So for me, when I was going through my own journey in life, at some point, and I want to say probably sometime in the military, I had this epiphany where I started to understand that my biggest skill wasn't necessarily like inside of companies and working in a specific department. My biggest skill was problem solving.
Yeah.
And I learned that about myself. I learned that probably was one of the most important and fun things that I'd enjoy, right? Figuring out what the problem is, getting to the root cause, and then figuring out how to create a solution for it.
Yes.
So do you have any skills like that you had epiphany moments on in your lifetime?
Sure. So actually, probably one of the other main points that was one of the primary things that I did while I was working for this Geotab reseller is, back in 2015, there was a big problem. It was with getting information about how this particular telematics solution worked out to the public. The only stuff that existed back then was long-form Geotab content 50-minute webinars that may or may not actually answer the question that people had. And I took it back to my bosses at the time and said, hey, no fleet manager is going to want to sit here for this period of time to maybe or maybe not get the answer that they're looking for. So can I build all these videos? So I built an entire library of training videos on my Geotab software and they were all short, between like 30 seconds and 3 minutes. So at most, if it didn't provide the answer that somebody was looking for, I was only wasting about 3 minutes of their time rather than almost an entire hour. So it was a lot of, I would say, kind of that problem solving side of it was, okay, here's the problem. No fleet manager is going to do this. Therefore, these fleet managers aren't getting the kind of training that they need. How do we solve that? Well, let's break these into smaller videos. And then you have to figure out, okay, how do I answer their questions succinctly so that by the end of it, they actually get what they came for? So I mixed a lot of my tech support skills with that. Okay, what are the questions when people call in? What do they have? How do we answer them succinctly? How do we do this in such a way that not only do they get the answer, but they get enough context to really understand kind of the nuances of the system that they're looking for? And so I would say like that's an example of where I saw a problem. And it ended up being a great help because as the company grew over the next 7.5 years that I was there, we probably hired fewer support people because we didn't have to keep repeating the same stuff. We could send people short form videos and they loved them because they could see, okay, click here, you're done.
Now, how'd you gauge the success to how it was previously done? The process that you created, how did you gauge the actual success rate?
That's a good question because it's kind of hard to gauge that. When I was with that particular Geotab reseller, we didn't have as big of an audience as Geotab itself. So Geotab's videos still had tens of thousands of views more than mine did. But I would say perhaps the best way to gauge that would have been the way that our customers responded. They were very happy. I would say, it wasn't necessarily like a KPI sort of thing where it's like, oh, we need to get X amount of views on this in order to make this considered successful. It was just like, are our customers happy? Do they like it? And at the end of the day, yeah. And I have new videos up. I've created my own video library since then because I no longer work for that reseller and Geotab software has changed and I wanted things under my own brand. And in fact, I can say for myself, even though the YouTube channel is only about a year old, my Geotab Drive for Drivers video already has at least, I think, maybe 2,000 views on it. Because I was able to teach it. Geotab's version of the video is 15 minutes long and mine's only 10. So I was able to teach it in a shorter period of time. But actually, one of the coolest things that I can tell you as far as being able to gauge that is I was just at Geotab Connect last week and I was meeting people who were like, we've been watching your stuff for years and it's so nice to meet you. And I was like, I didn't even know that. It was so cool. Like there was one day, and I like to put a little bit of humor in my videos because you retain things better if there are unexpected pieces in it. So if I can throw something in there that makes somebody laugh, they'll remember it a little better. And I had the funniest thing happen, David. I was at Geotab Connect. I was trying to introduce myself to as many people as possible because my business entirely, we didn't cover this before. I now run my own Geotab consulting business. I'm not a reseller. Thank you. I'm not a reseller, so I don't compete with resellers. In fact, some resellers are my clients. Some resellers' customers are my clients. But I was standing in line for lunch at Geotab Connect last week, and I turned around and introduced myself to the guy who was standing behind me. And he went, oh, I know who you are. I've watched your videos. You rickrolled me in one of them. And that to me was like the ultimate measure of, okay, what I'm doing makes a difference. People remember it. So there you go.
I really want to pinpoint the fact that that's a skill set. Being able to explain to people in the shortest and simplest way is a skill. And And it's something that I'm always trying to evolve and continue to learn, because when I started, there's all these complexities to the industry. And if you speak to somebody that doesn't understand the complexity, you're only going to confuse them. And there's this quote, I think it's Albert Einstein. He said, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you don't know what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I kept having to like refine, and I still, to this day, I'm always having to refine what the message is and how to get the message across, and especially like with textbook, right? Going from this place where everybody traditionally ran things a specific way and trying to explain to them what this new thing is and do it in a way that they understand it. It's a challenge. So I just kind of wanted to highlight the fact that what you do in regards to explaining all these complexities that Geotab has been explaining and doing it better, simpler, and making it easy to actually compute. It's awesome. So what took you from the Geotab reseller to what was your next role after that?
So actually, my next role after that was with another Geotab reseller, and people can find this on my LinkedIn, so it's not like a secret or anything. I worked for AT&T for about 10 months. They hit me up and said, hey, you want to come do the same thing for us? And I had somebody in my industry, because I agonized over that question. I had a great team at the previous reseller. I had been there for 7.5 years. They were practically family to me. And so I really agonized over that one. But I had somebody in the industry, one of my friends, I had asked their opinion on. They said go to AT&T because it'll give you a different perspective of the industry. And I'd been working for a very small Geotab reseller. It was a great one, and they do a lot of stuff with a smaller staff, but I had never seen the carrier side of it. So it did definitely help me understand what a much larger Geotab reseller, as far as just, something as global as AT&T, just what that part of the industry actually looks like.
So what's some pros and cons to both?
Okay. Oh man, I hope I don't say anything that gets me in trouble here, David. Good question. So I would say the pros of a larger reseller are that they can usually give some of the best discounts. The cons are it can sometimes be harder to find someone who can answer your question well. That's actually where what I do now kind of comes into play. Let me finish up the reseller thing though, just to kind of put a good cap on it, which is the smaller resellers, they might charge a little more, but the people who purchase from a smaller reseller are often going to, do your research, make sure you know which reseller you have and what their reputation is. Hit me up if you have any questions about that. But a smaller reseller often provides more like white glove support. So even though they're charging more, they are often providing a layer of service that is kind of unparalleled. That little extra money you pay is going to make your journey in the whole telematics space with Geotab or whatever you choose that much smoother, because you're working with people who are experts. Like I was in a call earlier today with somebody from one of those smaller resellers who they said they take their customer support so seriously. I think they even have like their people take some certifications and stuff. They take it very, very seriously, making sure their customers are well supported. So where I come in with that kind of stuff would be, if you've got a larger Geotab reseller or even one that's smaller that just doesn't do the white glove support, you already have your devices and all of that, I can help with the pieces that you may be missing. So I do like custom Excel reports, I do trainings, database structure type stuff. If people aren't sure about how to organize their rules and their groups and all of that, that's when they can hire me to help with that.
And this is for Geotab, right?
Yeah.
Because I know you're a subject matter expert specific to Geotab. Now, outside of that realm, what's your experience outside of that realm? Because I know that people have questions about different providers, and
sure,
they have questions about maybe the interfaces on other providers, how they differ from Geotab itself. What would that conversation look like if you had somebody asking you those questions?
Yeah, great question. So yes, expertise is in Geotab software just because I've had enough. I haven't needed to branch out. That being said, I would love to. I can definitely talk the high level telematics stuff. The kinds of clients I would love to talk to are people who are trying to decide which telematics solution to go with and letting me in on that demo period when, let's say, they've got a couple units from Samsara, a couple from, what is it, Keep Truckin'. They changed, though, recently. Motive. Yeah. And something Geotab, something like that. If they're running parallel studies, the thing I can bring to the table with that is, even though my expertise is Geotab, I understand the high-level telematics concepts, and I've helped with customer rollouts before. I can help with kind of some of the project management stuff to make sure they're not biting off more than they can chew, that kind of side of things. But that would be an opportunity where, say, a customer is comfortable letting me go in there and testing out their other platforms. I can give them a side-by-side comparison then of, okay, here's how Motive does this, here's how Samsara does this, here's how Geotab does this. Mind you, I'd have to test the Motive and Samsara stuff because I don't use it today. But I would be more than happy to learn and then show them, okay, here's how this would apply to your business, and here's how you can determine which one's going to be the best. Now, since I'm not a Geotab reseller, I have no skin in the game if they decide to go with somebody other than Geotab. And that's something that I hope is valuable to any of my clients, because at the end of the day, I just want them to get the best solution possible. And if Samsara or Motive does better for them than Geotab, that's the one that I want them to pick. And I'm not making any money off of it.
So for the project management side that you spoke about, is that project management on the deployment of the installations project, or is that another project management side of telematics?
Typically, that would be more, some of the stuff I've done in the past is like I've sat in on meetings with project managers who were managing for example, their development team, because they had routing software integrations that had to go into Geotab. And then I went on site and did some training for a customer that was rolling out the Geotab product while somebody else was doing the installation piece. And I trained some of their drivers on the solution. I trained their driver manager on how to train their drivers for the solution. I trained their back-end staff on how to use the Geotab product with the integration piece. And in the midst of that, because I was on site with them, I found out they were using another integration that they hadn't mentioned that they were just going to lose when they swapped their solutions. They were changing from one service to Geotab, and I was able to get in touch with that integration partner and make sure that it was as smooth a transition as possible. So we actually ended up doing an extra integration piece while I was on site just because we identified that they needed it.
Let's say that you have a customer, you're talking to them about 2-3 different options, and they decide that they're going to go with option B, whatever that is. And once they go to option B, they have no necessarily software stuff that they need to do. What happens with the deployment stuff? And I asked that, do you provide insights in regards to the deployment of installations? And I asked that primarily because there's current telematics companies that don't necessarily, they're starting to lean off of actually providing the services internally. And they tell their customers, well, you're going to have to find somebody. How's that look like for you?
On the customer, some of them have in-house installers and they're like, this is the way we want to do it. Others like to hire an installer. I don't do the installations myself. So typically my role is more of a kind of helping them to find the proper resources if they need them.
I wanted to ask you about the Geotab conference because I know you went over there.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've been to a few of these, right?
This was my sixth.
This is your sixth time?
Yeah, in fact, my first one it'll be 10 years ago, this upcoming September was my first Geotab Connect.
Did you go to Las Vegas last year?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, we was over there. Me and Adam went. Did you see the truck?
Yeah.
The technical truck?
I don't know if I saw the truck. I definitely saw you guys though.
Yeah, it was.
I think I ran into you.
Yeah, it was outside of entrance, and I don't know which entrance you came from, but
Yep.
we parked it right outside the entrance. Kind of couldn't
Nice.
miss it if you came in from there.
Yeah.
So you go to the Geotab conferences. What are some of the highlights for you? Like why every year you feel like this is someplace you need to be?
Well, previously when I was with other Geotab resellers, I was there largely to gather information. At my first reseller role, I was the most technical person there. So I would sit in on as many technical presentations as possible and just learn as much as I could to make sure that my customers were as up to date as possible. With AT&T, it was a similar position. Okay, what's Geotab changing with their software? What are new features they're rolling out? And are these relevant to our customers? Now I've been going on my own dime through my own company for the last 2 years. And that's a very different sort of thing because, all right, I can rewatch the replays on things typically. What I usually use it for now is networking. I need to get my name, my brand out in front of as many prospective clients as possible. And then I'll learn the stuff that I need to on an as needed basis. And I'm still keeping up with it on the side of I'm making the tutorial videos and things are changing. I'm going to probably be putting out a new set of those pretty soon here as some new developments roll out. But yeah, typically these days I go because I'm looking for more clients to be able to let them know what I do, to give them access. I have a ton of free resources that I want to just make sure they're aware of. And then hopefully some of them will hire me to help make them more efficient and save some money with their Geotab product.
How successful was the conference for you in regards to meeting enough people to actually be able to get the results you were looking for?
Ask me in a year and I'll probably have a good answer for you. As far as I gave out a lot of business cards. I talked to a lot of people and I met some people that had followed me on LinkedIn and stuff. So I would say in regards to being able to meet a lot of people, it was great. In regards to how many of those people become my clients, I don't know yet. It's only been a week. So
what would you say is your top 3 services that you provide that you feel like would highlight what your expertise is in?
Sure. So I would say probably the first one would be in-depth troubleshooting. If a company has some kind of a problem that they've taken to Geotab support and their reseller and they don't know what's going on, I can take a look at that because sometimes I can find stuff that other people haven't found yet. The other one of my other major ones would be custom reporting. I build custom Excel reports to help make sure that the data that the customers are getting is actually relevant to them and they can take action on it. So, for example, a customer that's looking for custom safety reports, I can give them a list of all their drivers with their safety score. But really, especially a company that wants to have, let's say they want to improve their safety quickly. Well, I can create a report that's going to help them. Let's target the top 3 worst drivers this week. Let's coach them and then work on the next 3 worst drivers, because it's usually a Pareto principle sort of thing where 20% of the drivers are doing 80% of the bad driving. And if we can target that top 20 and let's say depending on the size of the fleet, in 5 weeks, reduce that significantly because they've coached the right drivers on which behaviors are actually problematic, that can be a big deal. But any kind of stuff like that, pretty much when I work with a client and they're looking for custom reports, I ask them to give me a Christmas list, a wish list. And a lot of times there are reports we can make that they didn't even know were possible. Things like driver vehicle inspection reports, ELD compliance, that side of things. And then I would say the other one that for top 3 ones that I can help with is training. Because I've been in the industry for 10 years and I've trained so many people. Like I've rebuilt my driver training course 4 times already over the last 10 years. I'm going to be rebuilding it again probably this summer for the 5th time.
Why? Why do you keep rebuilding it?
Well, the technology's changed a little bit. So to make sure that the interface looks correct, but also because the more I work on this stuff, the more it becomes apparent which pieces people need to understand better. So as I did more driver troubleshooting for ELD compliance, for example, over the years, I would talk to drivers and I'd find out, okay, well, what are their actual questions? And for example, the latest version of my driver training program that I sell on my website, I had a DOT officer review it and tell me, hey, here are some things you can improve on this course that a DOT officer is actually looking for. So make sure you include these things so the drivers are aware and they won't get ticketed. That sort of a thing. But I would say like the training portion, the reason why I would consider that a part of my top 3 offerings is because since I've been in the Geotab space for 10 years, and I've worked with companies that had like 2 trucks or 2 cars, even sales cars or something, all the way up to thousands of trucks. I can usually save people so much time because a problem I spent, say, 6 months trying to troubleshoot and figure out, they don't have to because I've already done it. So if they hire me, they're going to be able to, in a lot of cases, solve things a lot faster than it would take them to figure out on their own.
Are there a lot of telematics consultants in the telematics industry?
I don't know of a lot of them. I've met...
I don't, me neither.
Yeah, I know of, the companies I know of do stuff slightly differently than I do. They're less concerned with the side of things that I'm typically trying to tackle. They usually do more like the development and integration piece, which is great. I recommend that when I have clients reach out and they say, hey, I need some dev work, I say, great, I can give you the names of 2 companies, hit these guys up and see which one you like better. But most people aren't focusing, at least not that I've found, on the actual like database implementation, setup, organization, and just plain teaching. And so I figured it was an area that there was some opportunity in, and that's why I'm here.
I think you can make the argument that a telematics reseller would be a really good consultant, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're biased.
Right.
So obviously they're going to sell their stuff. They understand the industry, and here you come. You're on the outskirts, but you understand all the perspectives and understand how everything actually functions and how the industry works as a whole.
Yeah, and that's kind of my hope, is that I can help the resellers get better at their jobs for their customers, or if their customers just are unsatisfied and they'd rather work with me directly, I can help them as well. And I could make more money as a reseller as far as steady income goes, of course. And I've had people ask, why aren't you a reseller? Have you ever considered that? I'm like, yes. And it probably would have been an easier, like as far as just getting the business up and running, because I've been at this about 1.5 years now. It might have been a quicker way to get things going and just have that steady, like, okay, every month I get my reseller subscription fee. But I really wanted this to be one of my main selling points, that I am not biased, and whether a company currently, I don't know that. I don't think I take any money from any companies I recommend right now. And I've had ones offer like, hey, you could be part of our partner program. And perhaps I'll consider it at some point, as long as it doesn't bias me towards anyone or another. But for the time being, in spite of the fact that I have left money on the table, the whole point of it was, all right, it might take me a little longer to get this really moving at the speed I would like it to. But if I can serve my customers better for it, it'll have been worth it in the long run.
So where's the place that Joy wants to be?
You mean like on the beach somewhere, or?
No. We got beach checked off though now.
No. Basically, I want to be out in front of as many people who need help, and I want them to know that they have someone they can trust to get them the results that they need. I want to be saving people money. I want to be talking to them. Most companies don't know the questions to ask in telematics, especially when they're either new to telematics or looking for a different telematics software. They don't know which questions to ask. And where I want to be is helping to kind of be a guide to get them those things. I want to listen to them. I want to find out where their pain points are. Okay, what are you guys trying to actually do, and how can we take steps that are significant enough to get you where you want to go as quickly as possible, but small enough that it doesn't feel like an overwhelming task in the meantime?
What would you say your capacity is? If you're working with X amount of fleets, like where you cap that for Joy to be like, hey, I need another person, or I need to automate some stuff?
I don't know. I haven't gotten there yet. So anybody listening to this, hit me up and let's
This is the
find
best
out what
time.
that capacity is. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I would say that right now is probably the most opportune time to deal with Joy.
That's right. That's right. Yep. I currently handle my customers on a first come, first serve basis. And I'm very careful about expectation management. If I'm working on a project for one client and I have to finish it by a certain time and it's going to take me a little longer to take care of another client, I absolutely will let them know. But typically I haven't run into too many issues with that. Because I've been doing this so long, I can usually handle the questions and things pretty quickly.
What's the most common telematic mistake fleets make?
I would say there are two. The first one is installation. So that might be relevant to you, David. I would say one of the biggest issues I see companies having, it stems from poor vehicle installation. So they run into issues where the devices aren't tracking properly. And it really usually comes down to, all right, is the device properly affixed to a solid piece under the dash? Is the harness properly zip tied or however it's supposed to be affixed to the device so it's not coming loose? So I would say that's one. The other one, and that's one more kind of where I come into this stuff, is companies typically tend to be under the impression that they can just plug in the device, get the data, and that should be enough. But often what I find is that companies, especially depending on how big they are and how complex their solutions are, you get out of it what you put into it at the beginning. So what you want to do is I've got 4 regional offices, and those regional offices deal with drivers, and those drivers, do they all drive separate vehicles and the same driver is assigned to the same vehicle every day? Or do they slip seat? And what kind of issues is that going to bring about in the data? How do we do proper groups management so that my driver in the Northeast isn't trying to pick a vehicle from the Southwest? There are a lot of things as far as just that initial setup that if you take the time, if companies are willing to invest in taking the time to do it right at the beginning, their telematics can pay off in spades because they're actually getting their money's worth. Did we set up an idling report, and are we saving the price of our telematics on just reducing idling alone? Those are the kinds of things that people need to think about when they start. And the sooner they can implement those, the sooner they'll start saving and the better that data is.
I'm curious about if a fleet had 20 vehicles, what's the time length of you doing everything that you need to be doing to actually set them up?
Yeah. So it would depend on the fleet and whether or not they wanted training as well. So if it were a fleet of 20 vehicles, I would say, and let's say they needed a couple of custom reports and some basic rule setup, that sort of thing, I might be able to set that up in an hour or two. But if they wanted, let's say they have ELD and they require some extra stuff, and let's say they have a fleet manager who actually needs to understand what's going on, that might look more like a 10-hour project just because there would be additional training and stuff. Of course, this is ballpark stuff. It really depends on the level of complexity they would require, what kind of custom reports they would want. But ultimately, if it's something where a company just wants me to go in and fix some stuff for them and just kind of, well, I don't want to say put a Band-Aid on it because sometimes that can be enough. But if they actually, I'm happy to teach the man to fish rather than just do the fishing, give them a fish. And usually that teaching component takes longer, but it also can pay off a lot better, especially if they've got a dedicated telematics expert on their team who just needs to be brought up to speed, who can then manage stuff going forward.
So if you have actual setup portion, roughly an hour, maybe a little longer, Then you have your training a fleet manager up to 10 hours, maybe a little longer. What if they wanted all the drivers trained?
Yep, that's an option too.
What's that look like though? If you had 20 vehicles, based off 20
Sure.
vehicles.
Well, it would depend on if they could pull all their drivers off the road at once. I think at one point, this would have been years ago, not when I was a consultant, but I think at one point I did a training for a company where they pulled all their drivers didn't work weekends. So we did like a Saturday morning training for, I think, a couple hours and managed that just in a couple of hours. I don't remember if we did shifts, and I taught a couple of times. I guess that's the issue you run into when you've been in the space for 10 years. But whatever the case, it would just depend on the way they wanted to do it. And that would have been a web-based training. If a company is willing to pay the expense to get me out to their location, I am happy to talk that too. I've gone on site for customers in the past and done driver training in person. I also offer I have my free driver training videos, so they can learn everything from downloading the Geotab Drive app to logging out and managing co-drivers and things like that. And that's for free on my YouTube channel. And then I also have a paid self-paced driver training course that has anti-skip features. It has quizzes that they have to get 100% on. They can take them multiple times, and they're not difficult quizzes. They're really more to just foster better driver engagement. But those are broken up into modules. They have links to different resources for the drivers. And that one actually, so the anti-skip features, I can't guarantee the drivers have watched all the videos, but I can guarantee that they've actually played them all the way through. And that, I actually had a customer last year who had asked about that. And the purpose of that is at the end, it gives a serialized certificate of completion to say, hey, we've actually had our driver go through ELD training. And it teaches them the whole Geotab Drive app. I would say if they're going through it kind of slowly, they could probably do it in about between 30 and 40 minutes for the entire thing. But it's broken up into sections. So if they want to do 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, they can do that as well. And
are they taking?
Yeah, there are 3 quizzes. It's broken up into 3 sections. There's like an intro, a middle, and kind of the advanced stuff at the end. And again, they're short quizzes. They're really more just to make sure that the drivers are paying attention. I kind of tried to focus on the things that were the most important for the drivers to come away with. And then at the end, they get a serialized certificate of completion. So it's unique to that driver. And then the fleet manager can go in and either save that as a PDF and keep it electronically, or print it and let the driver keep it in the cab if they ever want to show the DOT that, hey, we've actually put our drivers through this training. Here's where it is. Or they can do both. So they can just keep that on hand if they'd like.
If you could simplify one thing about telematics for fleet managers, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a great question, David. Man, that's a stumper right there. If I could simplify one thing, all right.
Yeah, just one.
Yeah. Probably the implementation process. Because
unpack that.
Yeah. Well, it goes back to what I told you before. If they put the time in up front, they typically get a lot more out of their system. And that can be really challenging for people. There's a lot to learn. And so if there were a way to simplify that, well, I mean, that's the space I'm in. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing today, is because I'm trying to make that process of that whole onboarding. Okay, we bought these devices. Now what do we do with them? How do we get the most out of this? And that's why I do what I do.
So I'm curious, how do you get in front of those customers at the pre-buying stage or the initial buying stage? Like, how do you get in front of those customers?
I go to things like Geotab Connect. I did run into some people who were considering Geotab and haven't purchased yet. So it's like, great, this is one of my ideal customers. I can work with either one though, but I would say that's one of them. Geotab's actually invited me recently. I've done 2 webinars for them. I did one back in October, and I did one actually about 2 weeks ago, right before Geotab Connect. And Geotab's been providing me their platform to be able to get in front of people. I provide training for their customers all around the world. I've done, the more recent ones have focused on hours of service compliance. So that's more of a North American thing. But they have given me that platform to use. So they get content for their website and I get a little more exposure for my company. And so far that's gone well. I've been able to get in front of a lot of people that way. And then other than that, I'm doing these sorts of things to try and explain to more people what I'm doing and why they should consider hitting me up to work with me.
Are you going to any like trucking conferences?
Great question.
Just where the fleet managers are potentially at?
I have not yet, but that's funny you should ask because I was just looking at one today that I was considering if I could make it to one. So who knows? Might be
Which one?
a Mid-American Truck Show.
Okay, sounds like a good one.
Yeah, I think that one's like, it used to be free attendance. I got to see if that's still the case, but if I can get in there and just start talking to people, I was thinking that might be a good one for me to check out and just go see what everybody's up to there.
Do you remember where it was located?
Yeah, it's in Louisville.
I got one more question for you.
All right.
What's a game-changing telematics trend no one is talking about?
No one is talking about. Well, if they are not talking about it, I don't know if we can call it a trend. However, not to be pedantic on you, David, sorry. But I would say...
I'm going to leave that in. You making me look like an asshole.
Let me
leave it in.
let me focus on the game changing. And I would say with that, it's education. And that's what people aren't talking about. And they should be, is if they're being properly educated, either from the beginning, or let's say they've had telematics for, let's say 4 years now, and they look at their system like it's a bother rather than a helpful tool. What they should be talking about and what that trend should turn towards is how do we get the proper telematics education and what does that look like and how can we then take that and apply it to our fleet in such a way that this thing that looks like a bother is now a great help to us.
Who's having that conversation?
Me. Not enough people, David. Not enough people.
We're both biased, right?
A little bit.
If somebody wanted to reach out to you, they wanted to find you, they wanted to get your to pick your brain for your expertise and all the knowledge that you have in there, where would they go to do that?
Joy at telematics411.com. They can email me there. They can find all my YouTube tutorials that are free on youtube.com/@telematics411, all one word.